Alrighty, this episode is episode 258 of Backpacking America. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Hoover Dam almost being dried up. And this is something that a lot of people are like, wait, what? Really? Surprisingly, a lot of people haven't heard about this. And probably because they haven't thought about the Hoover Dam since third grade. Uh, More or less, if you live in, on the East Coast or the Midwest, you're not really thinking about the Hoover Dam. But if you live in Southwest America, you're going to know what the Hoover Dam is and exactly what I'm talking about. So there's been a lot of droughts in the Southwest, and the Hoover Dam is at historically its lowest level ever, putting about 26 million people that rely on that dam for power and water in jeopardy of, potentially permanently losing their major water source. And it's a major concern because, in the Southwest, we're seeing, typically very conservative states that normally would be against climate control measures advocating for climate policies, such as rationing water is one of the major ones. In, I believe, Arizona or Nevada, it's illegal to have a grass lawn in certain areas of the state, and you have to fill it in with gravel in an effort to conserve water because a lot of people water their lawns, which, I mean, makes sense. It's greenery, it needs to live, and if it's dry, it could start a fire, so you need to keep it moist. It makes absolute sense. Some of the climate leftists will say that watering a lawn is a waste of resources, and to a degree, I mean, a lawn just looks pretty, but it's not a complete waste because you have all this arable land, and if it gets too dry and something sparks on it, it causes a fire, and everything you own is gone in a minute. So that watering your lawn is really the first step to fire prevention. Um, and again, there are water there are water suggestions or limits or rules in place to preserve the small amount of water those states have. There's not really a solution to uh, rebuilding that dam's water supply outside of like cloud seeding, but even then, that's like a whole complicated process that isn't an end all be all. A lot of people have suggested too, like when it comes to conserving water, or at least if you're gonna have a lawn, like there's other states too where those that are affected but don't have as strict water conservation methods. They suggest people that have lawns use it to grow food, so that way it's at least if you're gonna water it, um, it's going towards something that's sustaining you. So okay, the water will go into the garden, which will then feed you. It's just a better usage of water. Um, I feel you may need you may need less water because if you think about it too, like a lot of people in the suburbs that have sprinklers and such, um, they it's just watering the lawn all day long. And I feel like at least with a garden, you only need to water it for about like an hour. You don't need to consistently be watering it to um, preserve it. But then again, I'm not, when me and my dad had a garden, we weren't gardening in 100-degree weather. We were gardening in, 70, 80-degree weather. So it's also very hot down there. It's not really hospitable for human life. My major concern with a lot of, the water getting dried up down there is that where are these people going to go? They're going to go to New York. They're going to go to the East Coast where there's ample water. The temperature's cooler. It's more arable here. Down in Arizona, unless you're in, I believe in the northern portion, southern Arizona, it's like a desert. Southern California, it's like a desert. To a degree. I mean, more like when you're on the border of Nevada, it's like a desert. Nevada's a desert. Utah, it's more mountainous and rocky, so they don't really got to deal with a lot of the drought problems that the Southwest typically incurs, but again, it depends on the area of the state. A lot of those people are going to be affected though because they rely on the water from the Hoover Dam and from the Colorado River, which is drying up. Colorado River is at its lowest point in history. So it poses the question, what does this mean for the rest of the country? You have 26 million people that are all going to end up being forced out or because they need drinking water. Or we're going to have to spend billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, into taking water from areas that have water and transporting it there in an effort to make civilization survive in the American Southwest. Um, Personally, I don't really know what the solution to that is, but I really wanted to let everyone know that, the American Southwest is drying up, and the Hoover Dam, if you look at pictures of the Hoover Dam, it's like there's like look up a picture from like 1990 of the Hoover Dam, right? And you'll see the water up to the top of the dam. And on the dam there's a highway, right? And you could drive across, and it used to be where the water would be like 6 to 12 feet, below the highway bridge. Now it's so low that it's just barely scraping the surface of the valley, and you'll see like these big turbines that are used to like that the water, when it passes through, it spins it for electricity. Now you're gonna see the water all the way down to like the bottom of those big pillars, of those big turbines. When you look at them, it's kind of like it's actually like very scary. And a lot of climate change folks are going to say, "Oh, this is why you can't have a car, and you not riding a bike is the problem." And to this I say, to the climate change folks, like, yeah, I can understand, carbon emissions and all that, but the US military is the world's biggest polluter. You have billionaires and millionaires flying luxury private jets and burning diesel fuel in their expensive cars. And, you have major corporations that are skirting around environmental practices and eating lawsuits because of corporate protection. So um, it's not really me having a 20-year-old sedan driving around that's causing the problem. It's the government and corporate mismanagement of environmental waste. That's the problem. I mean, out here in Long Island, we have the Brookhaven dump, and it's causing thyroid cancers, lung cancer, skin cancers. There's an elementary school right next to it. Who the fuck puts a dump next to an elementary school? I mean, like that it gave a bunch of kids cancer. Who does that? It's really bad policy that's causing a lot of this environmental catastrophe. And while I do believe that climate change is real to an extent, I don't necessarily believe that it's it's the fault of the individual. Like, New York State wants to ban gas stoves from all new construction, and by 2026, and that's going to cost the consumer a lot of money. But it's not the gas stove that's causing the problem. It's the dumping. It's the industrialization. It's the overuse, the poor policy points. There's a very, like, there's no constitutional, like in New York, you are constitutionally guaranteed to clean air and water. So we take efforts as a state to make sure that we have clean air and water. There's no federal effort to preserve the Colorado River that I'm aware of. Because if there was, it wouldn't be at the lowest point it's at now, jeopardizing 26 million Americans. And folks, just to be clear, those 26 million Americans, not only are they going to be out of drinking water, their electricity is going to be even worse, because the Hoover Dam powers a large percentage of those states. And without the Hoover Dam functioning at full capacity, or any capacity, it's going to seriously cause a detriment to access of that service. So, you have this massive drought going on, and it could create conditions similar to what the Dust Bowl was. So the Dust Bowl in 1932 was an event where farmers in the Southwest and the Midwest did not have modern farming techniques. So they just kept farming the same land over and over again. Not that you can't farm the same land over and over again, but it was in the way in which they tilled the land. Over generations of time, the soil became so loose and so unstable that when large gusts of wind swept across the plains, it carried the dust, and it blacked out all of New York, and it blacked out all the East Coast. It even went into Europe. So, that's an environmental catastrophe. And it wasn't like, oh my God, climate change. It's like, okay, well, why is this occurring? Why is it blocking out the sun? Okay, well, it's loose farming. It's the farming equipment of the time. We need to implement new farming practices. We need to create incentives for the adoption of new techniques, and blah, 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 blah. And the problem was solved. Now we're seeing, Canadian wildfires causing horrible air quality. Why are these fires starting? Why are they starting? Why is it so dry in Canada? Find a way to make it not dry. That's really it. We just need to find solutions to the problem. And I understand that, like, and the thing is, like, screaming, it's climate change is not going to solve, the water levels at the Hoover Dam. Everyone understands that there's fucked shit happening. There's Republicans in Long Island that, they're against the climate change thing, but they take the environment very seriously. They're like, oh, wow, our nitrogen levels are very high in our bays and our waterways. We need to find ways to combat this. One of these ways is we're going to dump money into putting clams and oysters into the bays and the riverways, and we are going to clean them that way. And that's what they're doing. And they're finding ways to close off waterways from getting polluted. They're not screaming about climate change. They're like, oh, this is an issue that we need to fix. Here's a solution. Screaming about the problem and then making the average person suffer is not the way to go. So, there's efforts to help clean the bay by doing oyster seeding projects, right? And out in the Murchison Bay in Long Island. And that's being chaired by Republicans and the Murchison Bay Oyster Group, I think. I don't know. But it's like community groups and politicians. And that's doing something positive. What's not doing something positive is banning your gas stove and then expecting, New Yorkers to pay for it. I mean, if you think about it, it's like, dude, like it's going to cost me $200 a line to run $200 an electric line to run in my house, and then it's like $100 to $300 to remove each line of gas in my house. And then, of course, they're going to rip into the wall, so then you got to pay someone to... It's going to cost a lot of money. They're basically ripping your house and rebuilding it. And it's not fair to the consumer, especially when a lot of these politicians do have gas stoves. So the way I look at this is like, okay, we have clearly some problems, but a lot of this is like, what's a genuine solution to the problem and what's political points? I feel like the Democrats, what they do is they're just kind of like, they're like the college intern that's trying to make a really good impression. So they'll just like take on a task and be like, all right, fuck it. We're going to figure it out because it's our task now. Meanwhile, it seems like the Republicans in states or areas that have, environmentally sensitive areas are saying, all right, well, how can we do this? Is this going to be a feasible project? Will this do this and that? Blah, blah, blah. It just seems like that's like the two differences. The Democrats are trying and the Republicans are doing. And while it may seem, silly to just dump a bunch of clams in a bay, scientifically it makes sense. And it's a great way to help clean the bay. Now, the problem is, now you have all these high nitrates, right? And you have all these oysters. What is Long Island? Long Island is an island. And one of our biggest industries is clamming and fishing. And what is getting affected by high nitrates? You guessed it, the clams and the fish. And why are the high nitrates there? Because we are overexpanding. The developers are running their hands through Long Island. Our sewer systems are inadequate. And they are failing. And that is why there is so much nitrogen in the water, because the poop is seeping out of the island. Now, the Republicans did kill the bill that would have made 27 individual sewer districts in the county because they were afraid of past embezzlement, 20 years ago of those sewer funds. And they said, why are we going to raise sales taxes? Because why are we raising sales tax to 9% for the county? For the county, 9%. So it would be even more expensive. Why would we do that when we're already sitting on $700 million and we'd probably need only $200 to $300 million to create the sewer system out of what we have saved? And their logic was like, not that we want to piss away our savings, but, give people a break. Long Island's in the position, too, where everyone's leaving because it's so fucking expensive and they don't want to be the next New York City. So, and while I understand the Republicans' point there, the Democrats are also unwilling to negotiate that. So both sides killed it because the Democrats were like, no, we need to raise the taxes, and the Republicans were like, no, we need to keep it, how it is. There was no compromise made, and there will now be no sewers coming into Long Island. So these economic conditions influenced real environmental conditions. So the fear of embezzlement and high taxation, as well as the reluctance to use ample savings and take somewhat of a financial risk that wouldn't be that far off of, it wouldn't be catastrophic. It would just be like, okay, we lost about $300 million from the savings fund, but instead of trying to, take that money and find ways to raise money later on in life, both sides didn't want to see the end of it. So because of that economic constraint, it had the real world effect of more poop than can be handled flowing out of the sewer systems into the water, thus polluting the waters all around Long Island, damaging the fish by polluting them with high nitrates that come from the poop, thus polluting all the waterways and bays, thus necessitating a Band-Aid solution such as dumping oysters into the water, but then those oysters that are getting farmed are eating a bunch of shit, and that's unhealthy for human consumption because there's also high mercury levels, and that is now going to cause a further health crisis down the line. So a lot of these problems that can be traced now back to our original topic of the Hoover Dam comes down to money and economics and history of political corruption. So these economic concerns and fears and anxieties, as well as corruption fears and anxieties, are getting in the way of the bigger picture. Like, yo, our environment is getting affected if we don't take real steps now. So, and by real steps, I don't mean banning your gas stove. I don't mean banning your car, which, by the way, one of the major electrical bus companies just filed for bankruptcy, LOL. The real solution is finding, common ground, looking at the past, learning from it, but then realizing we have a real need to preserve a future on this planet, and we need to dump some serious cash into effective solutions. What are those effective solutions, some people are asking? Well, making it so that corporations don't dump into the waterways, that making it illegal to dump nuclear waste in the water, making it illegal to, not properly dispose of plastics, making it so that every municipality can effectively recycle plastic and glass and cardboard and paper. When I lived upstate, it was just garbage day. There was no recycling. They did not do recycling. Every municipality, every county should have a government-run sanitation company and in a recycling plant, so that way it can all be, understood. And it's like, okay, well, how much? Because here's the thing. Like, I understand private enterprise and all that jazz, but like, if the county doesn't have a waste service system and they don't have, their own trucks and their own this and that, and they're only subcontractors, how are they supposed to effectively figure out how much tonnage of waste has been recycled and how much tonnage has not been recycled, and then create policy based off of that? It really comes down to a governmental approach, or, you could go the private sector route and make it a law that all the private sector, sanitation companies have to create a monthly report of how much tonnage was deposited at the new recycling plants that the government should build, or at least give incentives to private corporations to build. And it's like, okay, well, how much tonnage did you, deposit here? And how was that compared over the last 6 months? So that way you can effectively judge if the recycling program is working or not. How else are you going to do that, right? That's one way to do it, is making sure every municipality has a sanitation service that can measure and track how much is being recycled. Another way to do it is, I don't know, like a federal program to try and rebuild the Colorado River and really look at like what practices are causing drought in these areas. Is it just that there's too many people consuming too many resources, and that's why it's at its all-time low? And because, during the summer it gets hot, but the problem is it usually rains, but the rainfall has been low. So why is it getting so hot, but why is it not raining? Why is there no rain, in the Southwest? There's usually a rainy season. That rainy season's going away. So it's really kind of figuring out, like, okay, why is this happening? And then making sound government policy. Don't put a dump next to an elementary school. That's fucking stupid. Instead, put the dump somewhere where there's no people and no waterways to pollute, and then we don't got to deal with this shit. But, so basically come up with solutions that make sense and don't sound like something cartoonishly evil or something out of like a Sims character. Excuse me. Whoa, that was crazy. I just covered that book in sneeze. Holy shit. Anyway, there's a concerted effort in the Democratic Party. And what sucks is like, there's a concerted effort in the Democratic Party to push climate change without any real option, and then Republicans to stifle any climate initiatives without hearing what they have to say. And it sucks for the activists and the community groups that are, they have these really great ideas for solving, climate discrepancies in their county or their town, but it comes down to politics at the end of the day. So a lot of these groups are left disconnected from each other in the government because it's like, there's a lot of politicking at the end of the day. There's a lot of, legal stuff that you got to go through. And I feel bad for them. So, and it's sad because we're still stuck in this mindset that like, even if you don't believe climate change is a serious thing, you can literally look at the Hoover Dam and just be like, okay, even if you don't believe in climate change, you could know that that's like a very dangerous precedent to set for the future, where it's like, wow, the dam is basically not going to be a dam anymore, and the Colorado River is drying. That's dangerous. That everyone can agree is a bad thing, and it really just kind of comes down to finding a bipartisan solution as to how to fix that. How do you fix it? So, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of people in government that don't want to do that. They're in it for the politicking, and mostly because they don't see it. They're like, oh, I go outside, everything's fine. I still get my tap water. I still get this. There's not that. The thing is too, like a lot of the climate people, they say things with such a sense of urgency. It sounds like there is no tap water coming out of your tap. Like right now, it's like even when I went to a hotel in California, right? They were like, yo, this was about 2 years ago. Oh, no, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. And they were like, yo, like, can you guys just like take less than, 5 minutes or less showers and like just make sure to conserve water, blah, blah, blah. That's what they said in the hotel. It wasn't like, and that was when the climate hysteria was at its peak in 2019. It was like, oh my God, the world's going to burn by 2023, 2024, 2025. And, now Greta Thunberg's deleting all those tweets. So, but that was when the hysteria was at its all-time high, and it's not nearly as bad as it is now. So, what I'm really interested about is the whole, like, I just don't really understand the whole like, hoopla, but not hoopla, but the whole, I don't know, like, I guess I don't understand like the whole sense of urgency thing, because it's like, we all believe you. You're trying to convince. It kind of reminds me like a lot of these activists too, a lot of the liberal activists talking to the government like it's their parents, and it's like, I don't know if anyone could relate to this, but like I remember when I was a kid and I would talk to my mom and dad, and I'd beg them to like, and that we live on like this fucked up road, and I'd be like, oh, like, please, like, I really want to take my bike and go ride down to my friend's house. And they'd be like, no, it's dangerous. And I'm like, no, but you don't understand. Like, it'll be so fun. It'll be safe. We'll wear a helmet. I'll call you when I get there, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no. It's like, and then just keep going on and on and on, trying to stress the urgency and how badly you want to do that, go on that bike ride. And they're still saying, like, no. Or we understand, but that's not happening. That logic of just continuously pushing someone in power or authority to do something when you're their subordinate is like, it's not going to work. You just have to go and do it, or you have to rebel in some sort of way to make them understand, like, yo, that's why, like, some people, when they, they'll like sneak out of their parents' house and they'll go and like go to the party anyway. And it's like, well, you're grounded. It's like, yeah, well, I have a window, so bye. And then, that either stops or they move out, and then who cares? It's kind of like a lot of the liberals are like, those liberal groups approach things so diplomatically that it's from a place of weakness and not a place of strength. And that's why I feel a lot of people don't respect their very honest and sincere arguments, but I feel like their arguments aren't taken in earnest because it's almost like the way that they're begging for someone to do something is coming from like a place of weakness, and it's not coming from a place of strength and authority and knowledge. And that's why a lot of people, when you talk about climate change, they're like, huh, whatever, I guess we're dead. So if the liberals change that dynamic, it would be a lot better. So, I just don't really see, I just don't really see how we're going right now, how any of this is going to get solved. But what I do know is that there needs to be serious, like, looking at ourselves in the mirrors as like a political grouping and individuals and a collective, and being like, all right, what's working, what's not working, and how are we going to achieve these goals? Because you don't want 26 million people to be displaced from lack of water or electricity. That would be disastrous, especially in a time where, you know, World War III seems to be on the horizon. You don't want state actors to take control of this. And it's even been reported that China has like critical access to our electric infrastructure. And that's dangerous. So we're having a water crisis on top of that. There's a lot of things at play right now where if our enemies wanted to kick us in, it would be very easy to do. But whether they're smart enough to do it or not is really up to debate. Anyway, this was episode 258 of Backpacking America. I'm really thankful for everyone that's listening right now. See you guys tomorrow at 6 p.m. for another live stream.